Hey everyone, welcome to the Parts Girl podcast. I'm super excited to be interviewing Denis. Jeff, welcome to the Parts Girl podcast.
Haley, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so you are the parts director at Marcotte Ford, correct?
That's correct.
Cool. Well, I always tell everyone that I don't get enough parts people
Oh,
on the show, even though it's called Parts Girl podcast. So thank you for
no.
coming out of your shell and joining the show.
Sure.
Yeah. So I've always liked to start with just kind of giving some background. So how long have you been a parts manager?
I've been a parts manager for about 13 years now. I originally started as a technician at a Ford dealership, and I went through that for about 10 years. And then I became a service advisor for about another 5 or 6 years, and then I transferred into parts after that.
Wow. You don't hear that very often. What made you go to parts? Was it something
Well,
that you wanted or just that was what was open?
well, I think it was a little of both. There was an opening at our dealership, and I had spoken to our fixed operations director about it, and I told him that I would be interested in, moving to that position, even though I had zero experience with it. But he was willing to kind of let me train on the job for, I would say, the first year or so. So I'm glad he was patient with me while I kind of learn the ropes of parts. So it was very good.
Yeah, that's very good. And so what would you say, what were some of the things when you were getting started as a parts manager that helped you? Because I feel like right now in the industry, there's so many new parts managers coming in, and they're just like hungry for information. So what helped you? And that was 13 years ago, right? So what helped you?
Well, I'd say there's a couple of things, and one of them you would think would be a negative, but one of them was, I would say, my inexperience with parts. I had no prior parts experience, so I didn't really have any preconceived notions on how it should have been. I wasn't really trained by somebody else in their way of doing things. And so initially in the beginning, I did a lot of reading and tried to figure out things on my own. And I think for a lot of things that actually helped me find new things that maybe somebody else that had been in the business for a long time could have said, well, I don't do it that way. So I feel like I kind of found my own way because I had zero experience. I had to learn something. So that was kind of, I think, it was a negative in one way, but a positive in another. And I think being a technician prior to that, even though I had zero parts experience, I had knowledge of cars, parts. I knew where things went, at least. So when I was answering phones or talking with people, at least I could talk a little bit about vehicles and things like that, and not completely stumble on it. So
I was gonna say, being that you were tech first, I bet that really helps because, like you said, you know the parts and you know how to
it,
answer the questions and all of that.
yeah, and I had dealt with a lot of people at the dealership, obviously all the technicians, because I was an advisor. So that was kind of an easy transition there. Like dealing with our service department, I had just been in it. So I got a better, idea of how things work. And I feel like that helped me in that aspect. Like I knew some of the roadblocks that parts can present to the service department. So I felt like I had a good idea of, because, 2 weeks ago I was dealing with those same roadblocks. Now I'm going to try to eliminate some of those. And I think that helped a little bit.
Absolutely. And like I feel like with you coming from service to parts, or I guess my question is, how was that? Did it give you a whole new perspective on parts? Because I feel like service, there's always this divide, and then so you going to parts, you probably got a whole new like, oh, this is what they're actually dealing with.
It
How is
was very enlightening, I think, from both sides. And the service advisors that I worked with used to, joke with me all the time and say that I went to the dark side and, how I was on the other side. And one of the big things with our fixed operations director, he is very much about both departments working together. It is certainly not one against the other, or even the sales department at our dealership for that matter. The ownership and the fixed operations director really stress that all departments work together. It is not your department versus my department. And I think one of the reasons why he was willing to let me go into that position was because I had a service background and that I would knew what some of those issues were and hopefully try to correct some of them. So that was helpful in that respect.
Oh yeah, I could see that. And so how many people are on your team now in
And our
parts?
parts team, with including like our wholesale drivers and counter people, we have 16 people now.
16. Wow. Okay. Now, how is wholesale? Because I think if I'm remembering correctly, you guys are pretty big in wholesale.
Yeah, we do a fair amount of wholesale in our area. Our area has a lot of Ford dealers in it, and it's a very competitive area for wholesale.
Mhm.
So, we do compete in certain areas. One of the things one of our main focuses is mechanical parts. A lot of dealerships focus on collision in certain aspects, and we do like a lot of fleet and mechanical parts. So that's kind of what we go for when we look for our customers. The body shops for us are not really where we want to be. So we do a lot of, fleet work, and a lot of it ties in with we have a commercial repair shop, and
Nope.
some of those customers are both, repair customers and wholesale parts customers. So we try to tie it all in together.
That makes sense. And I think that's the key with wholesale is kind of pick where you want to be or what type of wholesale business you want to be in and then do that, especially if you're in a very competitive area.
I feel like it's hard to do everything very well, whether it's, whether it's collision or mechanical or fleet or independent repair facilities, that type of thing. It was hard for us to be good at everything. Number one, there's the money issue of what you want to stock for inventory. You can't have everything. And we just decided it would be a better tie-in for us where we could service that customer. We have a commercial sales department also, so we can sell them the vehicle, sell them wholesale parts, and also service their vehicle at our commercial center. And that's kind of how we try to sell our dealership as, kind of a one-stop shop for commercial vehicles.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so it's funny too, hearing that you say you can't have everything in parts because technicians want you to have everything.
I still hear that a lot, even though we have a very large inventory. It's well over $1 million, and we mostly stock just mechanical repair parts, and yet still, we do hear that occasionally, why don't we have that on the shelf? And I'll go to look to figure out why we don't have it. And most times it's just because it hasn't phased in yet, but I still do hear it, even though, we do have quite a few parts here. So nonetheless, you still get it.
And how do you overcome that with your team on, explaining to them? Because I don't, if you're not from parts, you don't understand the different phasing criterias and there's different sources. How do you overcome that with your team and especially your technicians to explain, why
Well,
you don't?
I guess the first thing I do is, and if we don't have something that we need, I want to know why too, because if there's something that I've got a setup wrong, or, a part got put into a wrong source by accident or something like that, I want to know why, because it is frustrating for everyone in parts, whether it's the counter person, myself, or the technician, when we don't have the part that we need. So usually what I'll do is I'll go in and look at the sales history on it and try to figure out why we don't have it on the shelf. Is it only sold twice this year? Is it an extremely expensive part? To try and figure out why. But I would say with a lot of the programs now, especially with the RIM program with Ford, where they're really pushing you to stock heavily. I mean, our inventory over the last, I would say probably 3 years has gone up probably $300,000 just because we've been on the RIM program. So we're phasing in a lot more parts than even we used to have. So if we don't have it now, it's something I investigate to figure out why we don't have it. And sometimes it is just an issue where, hey, that part got locked in the wrong source and for some reason it's not coming up. And then we'll look at it and certainly try to fix it from there.
Now, lots of conversations that I have with parts managers because I'm in the sales role with PartsEdge, so I get to talk to people that aren't using PartsEdge. And a lot of them rely really heavily on the ASRs, and which I think that they can be really good, to help get things in stock. What's your perspective on that? And how would you, share that with other parts managers? Like, how do you kind of balance it? Because you said your inventory increased, and some people can't have that increase because they're not as large.
Um, I mean, in the beginning, it's been difficult because we sell collision parts, but we're not, we don't go out looking for it. So they would, the program goes, well, you sold that fender 3 times, you should have it, in your warehouse. And I don't have all this extra room where I can stock, doors, hoods, fenders, that type of thing. So even though I've sold it, because we do still have a few collision shops, and Ford says, well, you should have it, I don't want to have it necessarily due to either space or dollars. So balancing that has been difficult, where before it was easy for me when I ran my own stock order, to kind of work that a little bit easier. Now I'm kind of at the mercy of the Ford RIM program on a lot of our parts, and that kind of makes it difficult balancing, space, dollars, and what I really want to have on the shelf itself. Unfortunately, it kind of makes you maybe take things that you didn't really want to take, but you have to be at a certain percentage with Ford. I think right now you have to be at 95% of their recommendations, it's tough to do that. And I imagine other dealerships are running into that also, where they're either running out of space or their owner says, listen, we have X amount of dollars to put in the inventory and we can't go over that. And unfortunately, if you don't meet that criteria, Ford starts to take away money, from your, your back end money, which kind of makes it difficult. So they kind of force you into a certain area. Personally, I like doing my own stock order myself. I felt I had better control over what I had here. Certain seasonal items that, as that time came up, I could kind of bump them up a little bit, and then as spring came, kind of let them bleed off again if it was a winter item, where I don't have that control over it now. And not to say that the program is all bad. It certainly has phased in things that I wouldn't have on my own that I have turned around and sold. So it has worked out in those cases, but I guess I liked having control over, I felt when I, started working with PartsEdge and Chuck, and we got the stock order program kind of really dialed in, I felt like I had great control over it, and I could tell you why I had a certain part on the shelf, and I knew exactly why I wanted it there. And some of that has gone away with this program, which is a little frustrating at times.
Yeah, I could see that. And what are some of the things that you're doing to kind of balance the program?
So one of the problems is there are certain items that, in my opinion, it'll ask me to stock a lot of them. So if a customer may come in and go, I need 10 of these mirrors for this particular truck, and they buy 10 at once, and now it looks like I've sold, 10 of them. They go, well, you should stock 5 of them now. Well, I've never sold more than 1 at a time. Really, 1 is what I should be stocking, but the RIM program says, well, you should have 5 now. So I either have to accept the 5, which is dollar-wise not the way to go about it, or I have to decline it, and that part, even though I'm stocking it, doesn't count towards my RIM 95% program. So that's kind of a difficult spot, where there are parts that I do stock, I just don't stock as many as the Ford program wants me to. So that can be...
Even if you stock it, they don't count it as the rib part. Okay, interesting.
So if I don't stock in the quantity that they want, it doesn't count.
Got it.
So, and conversely, there are things that I look at, like quick moving things like rotors and pads, where I'll have, say, 4 of them on the shelf, and I may sell 4 of them in one day. The problem with the RIM program is, when I ran my stock order before, I would run it before 4 o'clock, and usually my depot would have it the next day, so I have them back on the shelf the next day. With the RIM program, it looks at my inventory at night, generates that order the next day, and then I don't get my parts until the following day. So now, if I ran out of that part on a Monday and it's a RIM part, I don't get it back till Wednesday, where I should have had it back on a Tuesday. So then what happens is Tuesday we go to look for that part again, and we don't have it. So now we're picking it up, at another dealer or, down street where that's not ideal. So if I feel like that number is low, then I have to go manually bump that number up in the RIM program. The only problem with that is they will protect those parts. So if they say I should have 2 on the shelf and I think I should have 4, when it comes time for that part to phase out, they'll only protect 2, not the 4. So I can manually bump it up, but I'm risking not being able to return it down the road.
Wow. That's a lot of, you got to look at so many different areas.
So that's one of the things that's funny is when Ford came out with the program, they would have all these pictures and with a parts manager with a cup of coffee going, how much time this program is going to save you. It's going to save you so much time because we're doing all your stock ordering for you, right? Except I would argue that it's created more work for me because now I have, instead of just running my one stock order, which I still have to do because not all parts fall into the program, so I still have to run the stock order. Now I've got to go in and look at their program and figure out how I need to tweak it to make sure we have enough parts on the shelf. So their argument that it saved time, I would say, is not correct.
I hear that a lot. Yeah. So would you say that having more sources helps you leverage some of the sales data and like what you should be stocking and really looking at things? Because I think what I find is when you have, a small set of sources, you can't really dig deep into the data because you have too many parts like in the sources. What's your perspective on that? Because I run into that too. I have parts managers that they've run with 6 sources and they're like, oh, I'm doing great. And I don't know how that's possible.
I don't know either, honestly. And honestly, I didn't even really understand that very well until I got involved with PartsEdge and Chuck Hartley had set me up with like a source table. And once he designed that table that was kind of specific to, our dealership, that's when like the light kind of turned on for me and it made so much more sense where if I want to run, say, a report on my collision parts, well, they're all in one source. So I can just run that source report and they're not all just jumbled into, I've heard of parts managers that have 4 sources and I can't even imagine how you function within 4 sources because especially with pricing and things like that, like when we price out wholesale parts, a lot of it's based on what type of part it is. Is it a Motorcraft part? Is it a Ford part? Is it a tire? If they're not in separate sources, they're not going to price out properly. And then you have to have your counter people manually pricing out each part. And I think we know what happens if we let it. They're just not going to have time. It's going to go out the door under cost. It's going to go out over what we should have charged. And then you're dealing with people calling back going, hey, why did you charge me this amount? It should have been that amount. Where when we have the sources set up properly, all the pricing is worked out. And for me, when I look at my inventory, I can go, all right, well, where's my powertrain? What do I need to do here? If I've got accessories that are been sitting around too long, it's easy for me to run that report quickly, call my distributor and say, listen, I want to send these parts back. If I didn't have that, I'm not even sure how it would be. I don't want to say it's impossible, but it would be so time consuming, you probably wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It'd be so much time that you have to spend. What's the fear? Well, because you came in when you took over, I think you brought PartsEdge in pretty quickly. I was going to ask, like, what's the fear behind having so many sources? Why do parts managers fear it? Maybe it's just the change. I don't know.
I think it's that. And again, I think if I had been maybe trained by somebody else and I knew that whatever their way worked, at least to some extent, maybe you don't want to, change anything there, where the person that I took over for, it may have worked for him, but honestly, I didn't understand how he had things set up. And after a year of fumbling around with it and trying to answer so many questions again on, why don't we have this part? except I couldn't answer them. I didn't know why we didn't have it. We could have sold it 10 times and I still didn't have it on the shelf, but I couldn't tell them why. And for me, honestly, it was embarrassing that I couldn't tell them, I want to be, good at my job, and I want to know that we have the parts available. And I knew I needed help at that point because I was still trying to, learn my job as a parts manager, yet there were so many other things going on. Time was my biggest problem. I feel like I could have spent 80 hours a week here and it wouldn't have been enough. And I needed help, and that's where PartsEdge came in.
Oh, that's really awesome. And I think that's the other thing too with the dealer, like just historically as a whole, dealers and GMs never understand the parts department. It's the least understood department of the dealership. And I think that by having conversations like this, we can share how much it's not just inventory. You also are managing people. You're managing another business within a business too, because you have wholesale. And trying to think what else. And you're dealing with the manufacturer programs, technician, all that stuff. There's just a lot. Organizing too. You're getting all these deliveries, and I mean, not that the parts manager physically has to do that, but you have to manage the people to deal with everything.
And I think that's probably one of the biggest, like even at my dealership, and I'm lucky that we're the size we are, where I don't have to answer wholesale phones and I'm not working the parts counter. I have enough other things that certainly keep me busy. And I always wonder like how there's plenty of parts departments out there that have a counter person that is also the part manager. And I wonder how they manage that, because I know I feel like I barely have enough time and I'm not answering the phone. I mean, I deal with some customer issues and things like that, but mostly I'm dealing with, either the Ford programs, making sure that we get paid the money that we do, following up on all those types of, there's so many programs now, it's hard to keep track of them. And I don't know, how somebody that has to do that can also do all the other things at the same time. It would seem to me that that's just about impossible. And I think that's part of the problem, where if you have a person that has to work 50 hours a week on the counter, and yet you expect them to stay late and, follow up on all these other programs and make sure all the parts you got billed for, you actually receive them, all these things, it would be overwhelming. And even though I don't have to do that, there's still so many things that I feel like I don't have enough time for, that I should spend more time on, but I just can't get to them. And I feel like it's a problem that there's so many programs, it's almost impossible to keep up with them.
Oh yeah, it's just a lot. It's to deal with. I'm dealing with that right now. I don't have enough time to do all the stuff I want to do. I think everyone deals with that in their job, right?
Right.
And then and we have to embrace technology and tools that can help us do our job quicker and faster, delegate, prioritize, all of that good stuff. But I wanted to wrap up the show. I wanted to ask you, since I don't have very many parts people on the show, Chuck's come on a couple times. I've gotten him to come on. But what is your favorite part about parts? Like, what do you love most about being a parts manager?
I think it's, for me, like the organization of it. I like to be able to look in and, look at parts and go, okay, these are not selling. We need to do something with those. And like managing the inventory. And I do really want to have the right part on the shelf when we need it. It's not something that I just say just to make it sound good, because I don't want a technician waiting for a part. I don't want a wholesale customer. When they call, I want to say, yeah, we'll deliver it today. And managing the inventory part of it, whether it's getting rid of obsolescence so you have room for new parts to come in. But I do enjoy that part of it.
Yeah, I could see that. I feel like if I was ever a parts manager, I would love the organizing part of it, because I'm such an organized person. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for coming on the show. I feel like a lot of people are going to love hearing from a parts person and your perspective and what you're dealing with. So is there anything that you wanted to add before we, say bye?
No, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you having me on, and I certainly I do enjoy listening to the podcast also.
Good. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us. PartsEdge, the power tool for your parts department. We hope you're leaving feeling motivated, challenged, and inspired.